Hosting provided by Host Tornado. They offer website hosting packages, dedicated servers, and VPS solutions. Host.t.net.
Programming Throwdown, episode 37, Funky Languages. Take it away, Jason.
Hey, everybody. So, yeah, we got an interesting question from...
Many interesting questions.
Yeah, we got several interesting... Yeah, definitely. Several interesting questions. I try to answer them on, Google Plus / Facebook / Twitter, wherever they come, / email. But this one was particularly interesting, so, yeah, we wanted to discuss it on the show. So Will wrote in and said, basically, what do you guys think about moving to Silicon Valley? I live on the East Coast. He lives in a small town in Georgia. I'm assuming he's doing tech, developing mobile applications, and he just wants to know, should I, make the trip over to Silicon Valley? So... I don't know. What do you think? I'll let you have the first shot at this.
There are many factors which should influence one's decision to relocate.
Oh God.
But seriously, if you've never visited and you haven't, if you're just thinking should I interview? The answer is yes. You should probably interview. Well,
that makes sense. Yeah.
More generally, you should interview. Part of that is you'll probably get a chance to come out here, because we are in the Silicon Valley, so that's why I say here.
Right.
So you get a chance to come out and visit, see what it's like. But I mean, everybody will tell you that property is really expensive. It's expensive to buy a place to live in, or even just to rent a place. At least in the really kind of main part of Silicon Valley. But there is a reason why everybody wants to live here. That is that there's a lot of good places to work, and the area is beautiful, the weather's great, and people love paying taxes.
People love paying taxes. I think you make a really good point. If you interview, provided you make it past the phone screen, you basically get a free trip to Silicon Valley.
That's for most big companies. Every company is a little different, but most big companies are that way.
Even startups, actually. When I was looking around when I was still on the East Coast, startups would also pay for you to come.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. At the time I was interviewing at Tesla. And at the time, they were really small company, and they totally flew me over there, or offered to fly me over there. Ended up picking a different company, but yeah. So you can interview, get a free trip. Make sure you, if possible, interview on a Monday or a Friday, so you can come the weekend, or at least
that's true.
Take some days off or something.
And be upfront with the recruiter, right? Because their job is to be very nice to you. And I give this advice, but I know I was always very timid in asking for things or accommodation, basically. But, if you have a significant other, a spouse or something, don't take advantage of it, in my opinion. But if they're debating whether or not they would also like to move, you should say, hey, as a couple, we're determining this. Is it possible for my wife to join me on this trip or whatever?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I didn't do that, and I kind of regretted it. I mean, it worked out fine, but it was a little nerve-wracking for my wife to, literally her first day in California was the day we moved. And it's there's really no going back. And so, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would have asked, if you think about it, if you interview at a big company, $200 or $300 plane ticket, I mean, they're not it's not gonna set them back, and it could really do you.
And having another
good.
person isn't really that big a deal because, they don't have to pay for another hotel room or really anything. So I did ask it from one recruiter, not for the Bay Area, but for another area, and I did ask, and they said that I could. I didn't end up taking them up on it because I ended up taking another offer. But they were very, sure, of course, that's no problem. And I had actually already flown there and interviewed, and I was asking to fly me and my wife together out again to do kind of an exploration trip. And they were okay with that as well.
Yeah, right. So that totally makes sense. So getting back to the question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, so you're right that you should definitely interview and all that. So we didn't waste time or anything. But,
okay.
But
should you move?
Should you move Silicon Valley? So here's my take on it. So this is a little bit of a different question, but it'll come back to the main point. somebody asked me, how come we can't just recreate Silicon Valley, in Florida or somewhere else, right? And there's been many attempts. Like, there's a place in India that's supposed to be like a technology triangle that's trying to be like an incubator. There's a lot of places all over the world that are like kind of tech incubators. And a lot of them like get traction, and of course they're successful to some degree, but like none of them are close to the success of Silicon Valley, right? And what I think about this is that you have sort of this pool of talent, and a lot of the information you need to be a successful tech company is sort of latent. It's lessons learned. It's not something you can really find in school, especially now because there's so much disconnect. Like, people in Silicon Valley aren't going back to university and teaching or anything like that. So there's just so many lessons to be learned, and so much sort of, what's the word for it, where it's like you just kind of have to be grandfathered into it. There's not really a way to learn other than it's like this language that's evolved over time that basically to be a successful company you need a couple of, say, Silicon Valley veterans. And so if there was some kind of migration out of the valley, then we could get these incubators in other places. But at the moment, the best place and one of the only places to get sort of veterans who have been doing, big data or practical machine learning or whatever, is here, and those people aren't moving. So
there are other places, like I read stuff a lot about New York, right? It's not to the same degree of startups, but like New York City has a lot of tech jobs and tech industry. True. And it somewhat, I think, is partly just you need a certain density of people, and then a certain percentage of those people to be, technologically minded, advanced computer science people, like that kind of stuff. And the areas, like if you take, Jason and I are both from Florida. If you take the areas in Florida where we were, even if there may be a lot of people, the density is relatively low. And the number of people who are from a technology background is also very low.
Right. And there's a chicken and an egg problem because let's say you're a brand new company. Like you're some startup, you just have an idea. You're Uber and you want to be, a phone app where people can request bars and they show up, bartenders, and they show up. You're going to have like a little bit of funding to get started, and you need to get some very talented people, or at least one very talented person to build, version 1 of the system. That means you're going to have to find someone who's willing to quit their job and take a huge risk to join your company. And that means you have to go through a lot of people. Like, it might be a 1 in 10,000 chance that you find someone who's in that position. And so if you go to, say, Florida, where there might only be 9,000 people who have that kind of skill set, now you're really in trouble, right? And so because of that, you don't have this sort of snowball effect. And so Silicon Valley is like one of the few places where you can go and find some very senior people to work on something, that's just an idea, right?
Yep. So I would say, should I move? It's obviously subject to a lot of personal decisions, and it is expensive to live here. But I mean, there are two things that are good. One is Jason kind of talked about, like, those talented people is also good for you as an employee because there's a lot of people to learn from, and a lot of really smart people typically.
Right.
There are not smart people too, I guess, but there are a lot of smart people, and if you can find them, you can learn a lot. Not even at your own company, but just like everywhere, right? It's all around you.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing is, like, for me, it's much better to move on my terms. Like, I decided like I wanted to move and moved out here. And then now if something happened and I was forced into needing to get a different job, or, there was a downturn in my company, right, then I would be forced to relocate. And if I'm here, the chance of me having to relocate away is low compared to where I was before.
Yeah, that's true.
Now there's still the problem of like what happened in 2000s with the tech bubble burst. But I'm already in the tech industry, so like in general, it's going to be a bad time for me regardless of where I am.
Yeah, definitely.
So
actually, it's quite interesting. When the tech bubble burst, I don't know if there was necessarily like people out of a job. Actually, no, I take it back. Yeah, I read stories about people like.
I think it got pretty bad.
Yeah, that's true. But to be honest, I find it very unlikely. I do think that there is a little bit of a bubble now, but I think if it burst, there's such a lack of talent that that the companies that are established will just swoop up all of the talent. I don't feel like that well will run dry, you know.
So basically, the long answer is it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say speak for both of us when I say that, you know, we love it here. But yeah, you should definitely bring, you know, your significant other if you have one, and give it a good evaluation, you know, before you come. So yeah.
So speaking of Silicon Valley and startups, how does a startup work?
Yeah, so, you know, I think, you know, we've been in Silicon Valley, you're completely inundated with startups, like reading about startups, friends who go to work for startups, things like that. But you know, I was thinking about this the other day that, you know, when I was in Florida, I really had no idea sort of what a startup is or anything. And you know, we're both tech savvy people, but it's just not it's really just a part of Silicon Valley culture. And so I felt like I wanted to try to share that with everyone. So, you know, neither Patrick nor I have ever worked in a startup. We both have friends who are at startups or have started startups. And yeah, basically, so this is kind of how it works in a nutshell. And Patrick, please correct me, because I'm sure I'm going to mess stuff up. But you typically try to start by contacting venture capitalists. So you make a very quick prototype. So some common you know, examples are the Zappos. That Zappos you know, shoe sales website. The guy actually started by going to Payless, taking like a real, you know, brick and mortar, like a Payless shoe store, taking pictures of the shoes there, and then going on his computer and making an HTML page selling those shoes for, I think it's like a 10 or 15% markup online. And then literally, if someone would buy the shoes, he would walk down the street to the Payless, buy the shoes, mail them himself, right? So it's like super, super low tech. But it was enough to go to a venture capitalist and say, look, I've been doing this for a month and I got, you know, 2,000 people ordering shoes. And then what will happen is, another way to do it is they have these, I don't know if I'd really call them competitions. I guess maybe like incubators. They have like Y Combinator and StartX and some of these other ones where you sort of enter a competition and you pitch an idea, you know, with varying degrees of completion, and then they choose, you know, some winners, and those winners, you know, get connected with venture capitalists. But your goal is to get connected to a VC or a venture capitalist. What they will do is they will give you some money, like maybe $5 million or $10 million, but they don't give it to you, they give it to the company. And then as part of giving the company this money, they also sort of set up the company, and they set up all the, you know, infrastructure you need to run a company. So you and the venture capitalist together figure out, for example, how much you should get paid. So like however much you should get paid, that's money that isn't going into the company. And so, you know, also like how much of the company you own. It's like if you want a really big salary, then the venture capitalist is going to say, okay, but now you're only going to own 10% of your company instead of owning like, you know, 50% of your company. So it's sort of like how much do you want to risk and things like that. Once you've sort of set all that up, then now you have this money. You can use the money and your prototype to try to get, you know, some of your friends or other people in the valley to join your company, and you can pay them. And it's the same deal for them. Like you can give them money and you can give them, you know, a piece of the company, and they can sort of decide how much of either they want to take. And then you're up and running and you're a startup. Then you go through some rounds. So the deal is, you know, eventually you'll burn through your, say, $5 million. Like you'll spend it all. And then you'll say, okay, well, we have a good company, but you know, we're not making enough money to cover our expenses yet. So then you go back to these venture capitalists and you say, look, I took your $5 million and I built up this company, and the company last year made, let's say, $500,000. So what I do need now is I need $10 million so that I can like continue to expand the company. And this and this and this and this reason is why, you know, I'm going to turn a profit and all that stuff. And so then they give you some more money to build a bigger company. And, you know, at some point you become very big and you become sustainable. So for example, like look at Uber, for example. So Uber is still a startup technically because, you know, they haven't IPO'd or anything like that. But Uber is, as far as I know, is actually, I don't know for a fact, but I believe Uber
they just
is
closed
profitable.
a new round. No,
they closed a new round.
I think it's one of
so
those.
They're probably
Okay, so
not.
this is careful, right? So like, there's always a trade-off between how fast you grow and, you know, funding your growth from your profits. So I believe I'm correct in saying that I think Uber has continued to raise more investment capital to be able to expand even faster, to have a first mover advantage. So basically they're trying to get to as many stories as possible, as many cities as possible. And so they could slow down with the cities they are and be essentially profitable, but it costs a lot of money for them to roll out in a new city. And so they'd rather keep bringing on new cities rather than getting profitable. And they're like one of the most well-funded startups in history. So like they have been given, like their investors agree with them basically. And,
Gotcha.
And
Yep.
that's what they've chosen to do.
So yeah, what Patrick is saying, like another part of that is, you know, and Groupon has this as well, or had this, is it's very hard to sort of, I mean, you hear a lot about patent trolls and patent lawsuits and things like that, but in general, if you have a business idea, it's pretty easy to copy. And it's also very hard to shut down clones, especially clones in other countries and things like that. So a company like Uber, they have a good idea. They need to get their idea in as many cities as possible so that there isn't like a Detroit version of Uber, you know, run by a different company, a Houston version of Uber, so on and so forth. So that they can own all of the cities, right? And so to Patrick's point, like it might be more important to own all of the cities so there's only one Uber, even if it's like going to take a ton of money, and then they can make that money up later. So yeah, so that part is pretty complicated. At some point, your startup becomes pretty big. And then actually, let me step back a bit. So there's multiple ways for your startup to not become a startup. The most common is it dissolves. So I think it's like over 90% of startups fail. And the number one reason they fail is actually infighting. So the people who work at the startup, you know, clearly the people who work at the startup believe in the startup to varying degrees and are invested in the startup to varying degrees. You know, some of them are getting a bigger salary, but are getting less, you know, portion of the company as a result. And so that creates a lot of tension. And so actually the number one reason why startups fail is that the people, you know, there's social problems and the startup falls apart. Of the startups that succeed, there's two major categories. One is, and this is for more of like startups that are more technology and less of like a product, is that the startup gets acquired by a bigger company. So let's say, you know, I make a startup where I do statistics for people, where I built like some cool statistics system. That isn't really a company. Like I couldn't go to Patrick and sell him statistics. Like it's really like a business service.
Well, no, so it is a company and you can make money, but Jason's talking a lot about venture capital and it's hard for them. They want to recoup a lot of money quickly. And so they're taking a lot of bets and they don't want to bet on someone who says, over the next 10 years, I'm going to make $1 million each year, but not grow. I'm just going to keep making $1 million. Like I don't have a business plan. I don't want to make $1 billion. I just want to keep making $1 million every year forever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They're not really interested in gaining just a percentage of profits each year. They want you to have an exit. They want you to, as Jason's saying, sell it to another company, or he'll talk about the other option.
Right. Like most of the time, I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, but most of the time, if a company gets acquired, it's because it has some kind of service, and you know, usually if a company IPOs, it's usually like a product. You know, it could be like a product that serves businesses, but it's sort of a very well-defined product. But if it's like a service, Like we do machine learning services to other companies. That usually turns into an acquisition. So let me explain both of them. So an acquisition just means, you know, a bigger company says, hey, look, here's this startup. It has like, you know, say 8 people. They're all really talented and they all work together and they're not fighting and they haven't destroyed each other. So, you know, it'd be great if we could get 8 people who are all very talented to work at our big company. Like, that'd be awesome. We could just put them in a team together and we know there's not going to be any problems. So they'll say, you know, let's buy the startup. And so they might make a pretty big investment. Like they might spend like, say, 20 or even $100 million. And they buy the startup. But what they're really buying is they're buying those people. Like they know that some of the people on that startup will stay at the big company. Some of them will leave because, you know, you can't force someone to work for you. But, you know, some of them will stay. And, you know, they have a very cohesive team. And they'll usually work something in writing where everyone has to stay for at least a couple of years and things like that. That's an acquisition. Another way that a startup can not be a startup is through what's called an IPO. And that's where a startup becomes a publicly traded company. So do you want to explain this? You'll probably be better than me.
Sure. IPO is an initial public offering, and that basically says that you're going to divide up the company into certain percentage shares, and you're going to offer those to the public. And there's all sorts of rules about how you can do this. And if you look at an example like Facebook is kind of the most recent famous one, but Tesla as well. So these are often traded to a small number of people initially on what's called a secondary market, a closed market, where you have to meet certain criteria in order to be able to trade. In other words, not everyone can buy Facebook shares. You have to be an investor, basically. Then they decide to IPO, which means that there's no company, they either just want to, or there's no company big enough to buy them, or no company that's interested in paying on their terms. Whatever the reason may be, they decide that they were just going to sell some portion of the percentage to the public. And so they do what's called initial public offering. And you work through an investment bank to handle all sorts of complication and going to various retirement funds and getting them to agree to buy portions of Facebook and, you know, all this stuff. But basically what's going to happen is that it'll be regulated, it'll be known, you're going to declare, here's all my earnings now, because before you kept them private, and you agree to all this stuff and say, now the public can buy and sell, you know, a share of Facebook. And for all those, say you sell, I'm going to sell 20% of the company in, you know, 20 shares. So basically each share is 1% of the company, and Facebook keeps 80 of them and sells 20 of them to the public. And they raise money by the people buying them at whatever the initial offer price is.
Right, exactly.
So, and then from then on, when it's traded, like if you go into your brokerage account and you buy Facebook right now, Facebook doesn't get any money from that. Unless it happens to be that a person at Facebook is selling you that share. But most likely, you know, like Jason could sell me that share of Facebook. It's not coming from that company anymore. So they don't continue to make money off of those shares.
Right. So what happens if you buy all the shares and you just own the company? Like, how
no,
does
because
that
they
work?
don't offer the whole company. So in the case of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg now has the equivalent, since after the initial public offering, he owns, we could look it up because it has to be public, but like, let's say he still owns 30% of the shares. But then his shares may be special shares where he gets like 2 times the number of votes. So he may get like, you know, essentially whatever that would be works out to be, but he would get, you know, more votes for his 30% of the shares than the rest of people, or some combination of people basically hold. So in the simplest case where you don't do vote multiplying, it's that, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and, you know, whoever his other co-founders are own 51% of the shares, and they only ever release 49% to be sold.
Gotcha.
So that's how they maintain ownership. And then there's all sorts of clever ways to kind of keep ownership without having to own all the stock. Keep control, I should say.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So yeah, so that's how that
works.
Yeah,
so that's startups in a nutshell. I mean, it's known for being a lot of work for very little pay. But, you know, you're looking at the total expected value. So you know, you're hoping that if there's some kind of acquisition or something like that, that you can, like, what they call cash out. So you might work for, 1/4 of what you could make as a regular employee at another company, but you also own, let's say 1% of the company. And so then if the company becomes as big as Facebook, now you own, 1% of 40 billion, which is what, 400 million, which is a lot of money. So you're taking a chance, you're sacrificing like your pay for a chance to do really well. And I mean, statistically speaking, you won't do as well as like a Facebook or Google, which is like highly unlikely. But again, like if it's something you really believe will be successful and it will be like a acquire or something like that, acquisition or something like that, then you could do really well. I mean, if you knew for sure that you would get acquired or IPO, if that was a guarantee, then you would work there. Like we would all be working at startups.
No. If it was a guarantee, the incentives would be structured differently, and you wouldn't get the same payout.
You're absolutely right. So what I'm saying is like, if there was a guarantee that it could IPO and you were getting like 1 or 2% of the company or something like that, then everyone would do it. But yeah, then to Patrick's point, like once a company is like Uber, where everyone knows it's going to be successful, then they know that there isn't a risk. And so then there's no reason
you get directly less percentage of the company at that point.
Right. Like,
but it can still be really profitable because a lot of times they still really need people. And so they're willing to, it is easier for them to give stock than dollars.
Right.
So you still can, like, I have no idea, but I assume now you can probably still get a pretty good deal going to Uber and getting stock because they're more easily payable to you in stock than them. But then you're having to hope that by the time you can actually sell that stock, that it'll be worth more than what it is now, which is essentially nothing because you can't sell it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's another thing that's actually good to talk about is it's very hard to know the value of a non-public company. And we've seen this, right? Like with Facebook, when Facebook had the IPO, they IPO'd it, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I mean, it was roughly like $30 or $40 a share, which means you take, say, $30 and you multiply by the number of shares, and that's how much, they think that Facebook as a company is worth. But then, like, within a month, they ended up at, I think it was like $12 a share. So what that means is that the public thought Facebook was worth 1/3 of what Facebook thought they were worth. And I mean, it's more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, what that means is, the people who were at Facebook before they went public thought they were getting a certain amount of, like, they thought that they were worth something, like their shares and everything. And then within a month of the IPO, they found out that the shares are actually worth 1/3 of what everyone thought they were worth. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, but, because of that risk, startups will give you more shares and things like that because they know you're taking on a risk that other people aren't willing to take. So,
good. All right, I think it's time to move on to the news.
Okay, so
I got the first one. This came from a reader, Bent, and he sent us this. It's kind of interesting. If you have a GitHub account and someone makes a pull request against your repository. I don't know. I'm probably getting the exact wording wrong because I use too many different tools. But that basically when that email comes in, now in Gmail, it'll actually give you a little button on the side of the subject line that allows you to directly go and view it. So essentially there's now integration between Gmail and GitHub for viewing updates and stuff that come in.
That's awesome. Is that like... did they have to work with the Gmail team, or is there like an API or something?
I was actually just wondering that, and I clicked on it. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, they're probably.
I think it's like a way for the like GitHub embeds something in their email basically that tells like, hey, there's this thing Gmail. This is how you render it or whatever.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
But because Gmail's so big, I guess it's worth it. And so many GitHub users use Gmail. But like you would probably have to do something different. Like there's no standard, I don't think. So like they wouldn't now also get something in Yahoo.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, my news is on Rust. So actually, we should cover this. This is a brand new. Well, sorry, it's a brand new language to me. But I read about it when I saw this news article. So the news article is Rust 0.12.0 is released. And so I was looking into Rust, and I'm not going to say too much because we should dedicate a show to it. But basically, it's a language that's intended to be very fast for like system software-y stuff, like C or C++. But the compiler is like very, very smart. And they've reduced sort of what you can do a little bit, although it's almost as fully featured as C or C++. They just handicap you a tiny bit, but in exchange, the compiler is actually extremely clever, and I think it's pretty cool. I'm going to do more research into it, and we'll have a whole show dedicated to it. But yeah, take some time and check it out. If you're into doing low-level, C, C++ tasks. This could be really cool. So, and it compiles to like machine code and all of that. So if that's important,
So the next one is about Intel processors underestimating the error bounds of sine. I think it might just be trigonometric functions in general by 1.3 quintillion.
Yeah, a little bit of sensationalism.
Yeah. So what this is, there will be a link, or you may have already seen it, or you'll be able to search for it. But so interestingly, you design a processor out of silicon, and they, it's kind of there forever. It just stuck with whatever is there. And Intel had some famous kind of problems in what happens when things go wrong or what inputs. And this one's a little more subtle and has apparently been around for several years. And the documentation around the various functions are incorrect. And one of it is that I believe it's actually in the processor as far as I could tell when I was reading it. Now that I'm thinking, I'm like, I wonder, because Intel actually also makes a compiler for their processors. So I hope I'm right in saying this is actually the processor, because I read it with an assumption. Okay, good.
You're right.
Because I read it with an assumption, and now I was like, oh no, maybe I. Okay, anyways. And so basically, the interesting part of this is that when you do a sine of a number, that number could be pretty much, the input could be anything. So in double or flow or whatever, the range of inputs is as big as you can support in doubles. And obviously, you really only want to define sine as a function of just like the first repeating interval. Or some repeating interval. So you want to take whatever the input is and essentially wrap it around, because sine is periodic, right? So sine keeps repeating itself. So you want to reduce the input to something that's in a very specific range and then give a really precise answer in that range. Also, you're forced trying to represent, the infinite part of sine out, and it gets really complicated. And this is actually a really common technique for a lot of things, where you have a number that doesn't overflow or have a limit, but actually just keeps wrapping around and defining that wraparound function. And it turns out that there was a problem when you give a number that is very close to sine, or to pi, very close to pi in the input, and they had not as many bits of precision as they thought they had. And so what it causes, like a whole, like the output basically is far less precise than it should have been. And it's actually the silicon because of the way they're reducing that input, the way they're trying to wrap it around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you end up with what's called catastrophic cancellation, which is an awesome name. But basically, it just means if you try to subtract two numbers, that so in other words, so just a quick recap on floating point, right? The way floating point works is a little more complicated than this, but let's just simplify it. Imagine if you had, say, a number like 0.12345, right? So you could just represent that in floating point by saying 12345 times 10 to the negative, 6th or whatever it is, right? So that's sort of what they do. So they end up with like a regular number, and then they store an exponent. Now in their case, they do times 2 to the whatever, but let's just pretend it's 10 to make life easy. So if you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then another number that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, then when you subtract those two, all of those first numbers are going to go to 0, and the difference is going to be 1, right? So that's going to cause like your exponent to change a lot too, right? Like you can think in your head, like think you have these two big numbers, but now you subtracted them and you end up with this little number. And so actually the little number, you kind of have a lot of room to the right. Like if there were other numbers, like if it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dot like 0.789, 10, 11, or 789, 9999, you know, those things after the dot become important. Like before they were small because you had this huge number and then dot and then this tiny piece onto it, right? But as soon as you subtract two huge numbers, then the tiny pieces after the dot, all of a sudden they're important. But if you got rid of them because the number was big and they weren't important, so you chopped them off, it's like you chopped off something that wasn't important, but then it became important later. And that's called catastrophic cancellation. And that's really bad, right? And so that's exactly what happens when you take a sine of a number close to pi. So,
yeah. And so the reason you get such a large thing is because when you're dealing with 64-bit numbers, it's very easy to quickly escalate things to the point where you have this quintillion counts of error or whatever.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
Math,
cool.
It's hard, especially floating point stuff.
Yeah, floating point stuff is just a total nightmare.
It's just tricky. There's a lot of corner cases. It's really hard to test very well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like deceptively simple. Like you think it's an easy idea. Like, okay, we'll just take the first few digits and then we'll put 10 to the whatever. Like we've been doing scientific notation since we were in, 6th grade or whatever. So you think it's going to be easy, but then the problem is computers are like doing so much math on the same number that even if you make like just a tiny little approximation, it can burn you. That's what happens here.
And like you point out, there's all sorts of cases where like in actual math, the order of operations doesn't matter, but in floating point math, it does matter. So like if you multiply a very large number by a very large number by a very tiny number, like the associative rule of how you actually do that will change your answer.
Yep.
And you have to be aware of that. Yep. And even people who are trying to do it really well still end up doing it wrong sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So yes, this other news. It's this is only for students, unfortunately. But if you are a student at high school, university, I think any institution is fine. Then you can get the GitHub Student Developer Pack, which looks pretty freaking amazing. It is just a huge laundry list of things that you get for free. So yeah, you get like crowdsourcing from Crowdflower. You get a pro GitHub account. You get the Unreal Engine. You get SendGrid to like programmatically send emails. You should get a ton of amazing stuff for completely free, for no cost, as long as you can prove you're a student. Pretty freaking awesome. If you are a student and you're listening to us, you're high school, college, whatever, get this. Sign up for this. It is incredible. So, another thing, a little bit of a side note, but Amazon has something similar, and get that one too. You get like free, computers, like free virtual machines on Amazon.
Yeah, AWS or whatever.
Yeah. So check that out.
Cool. All right, it's time for Book of the Show.
Book of the Show. So my book is called Impro for Storytellers. It's pretty cool. It's this guy. He's a famous, or I guess not famous, but he's a very experienced improvisational instructor. And so he does a lot of like corporate events and things like that. He also, teaches, people who have gone on to work at Saturday Night Live or write for Saturday Night Live or things like that. And And he wrote this book, and he kind of intended it for everyone. He has a similar book that's kind of meant for people who want to get into improvisational comedy, which is, for me, not that interesting. But this book is really cool. It's kind of meant for anyone. And it just talks about sort of how to be improvisational and how to think creatively and how to sort of think on your feet. And it seems pretty cool. I mean, I haven't got into it yet. I've only ordered it. So,
just like a preview.
I'll have to give a recap. But, I read through some of the preview of it, and it looks pretty awesome. And so, yeah.
Cool. Mine is, of course, not helpful. It is just a science fiction book, The Android's Dream, which is by John Scalzi, a reference also to the Philip K. Dick Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I initially thought there was something weird going on there, but I think it's just an homage to the other work, and they make reference of it in the book. And so, but it's not at all related as far as like the storylines. And this is the first book by John Scalzi. I may have read one other book by him, but he writes self-described by him as, introductory science fiction. So this is much closer to just normal fiction, but with science-y settings. So I often recommend books which are considered more hardcore science fiction, like very deep, all sorts of pseudo-science-y explanations for things, and even real science or physics involved. Like, this is really plausible. This is more of just of a fun tale. I don't want to talk too much about it because I never want to spoil anything. But basically, this is just more of a fun tale. It's in a sort of a science fiction setting, and it was a very, I guess, light read, but it was very good. I enjoyed it.
Cool.
So if you've tried to get through some of the other very large tomes that I've recommended and you haven't, try this one instead.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Tool of the show. My tool of the show is what I'm using to stream to Twitch right now, which is called Open Broadcaster software.
So Twitch actually recommended it. I went to Twitch trying to figure out how to stream. Just to stream the show, just kind of for kicks, and they said, "Hey, use this program." And
do we have any viewers of our stream?
We have one person.
Oh yes, hello person.
So Callan444, major props to you for checking out the Twitch stream. I only gave people an hour's notice, so I wasn't expecting, a huge turnout or anything like that. But the thing that I really think is cool about Twitch is the chat, actually. So, people who are, actually, I was inspired to stream this because of our user
Twitch
question.
Twitch plays Pokemon. Oh.
Oh, God. No, so user question is, the person said, sort of, what's it like to be in Silicon Valley? It made me think we really should try to get, a bit of a community going where people who like the show and listen to the show can meet each other.
Literally zero people,
and we have one person. So Callan444, props to you. Sorry you couldn't meet anyone, but you can meet us for what it's worth. We'll do this maybe a couple more shows and see sort of what kind of turnout we get. But so I'm using this Open Broadcaster software, and it's pretty cool. It's actually pretty straightforward to set up. I didn't really... the only trouble it gave me was I made some changes to the settings, and I had to shut down the program and restart it for the changes to take effect. But I didn't know that I... they didn't tell me to restart the program. So just a minor nit. But, other than that, it pretty much worked out of the box. And, pretty cool tool.
Nice.
Also, they have a version for Mac and a version for Linux is coming. So, yeah.
Cool. Mine is also video related, sort of, and that is Plex, which is at plex.tv, or I think you can just search Plex. And this is a combination of things, which is, I guess, somewhat controversial, but I enjoy it, which is a server that you run on, I think they have Windows and Linux at least. I run both the Windows and the Linux servers, and a client has a web interface, or also it has Android apps, iOS apps, whatever you want. It works on, I have a Chromecast, and that's how I use it a lot. It works on the Chromecast. And what it does, it will serve you all of your media. I think it does audio, pictures, videos. You kind of run the server, you point it at where your media is stored. And if it's, for instance, music, it'll be able to access IMDb, properly populate it, give you all the kind of what we come to expect ability to kind of search from it. At least I think that works well. And then if you have like your tablet or your phone and you have the app, it's able to stream from your network and stream it across. You say, well, there's like 1,000 ways to do this. I've talked about various ways before, UPnP ways, DLNA ways. And Plex, I think, actually does support any DLNA client or maybe even UPnP client. I don't know. But the one nice thing it does is will handle the transcoding. And it's the first one I found that actually just works. So it is mostly free. There are some features like casting to a Chromecast. You have to pay to get that feature. And I kind of feel bad.
Wait, how does that work? Like, how do they make you pay? Like
so,
through the app?
So if you have in the app that actually does the casting, and there's probably ways around it, but I didn't bother with it because I wanted to support them because it actually works. And if you haven't signed in with essentially a paid account, it won't give you the option to cast. Or if you try to cast, I think it tells you like, oh, you need to upgrade or whatever.
How much is it, a monthly fee or is it
a so I actually just this is kind of a shame. I bought like the lifetime subscription. I've never had TiVo and we don't have cable, so I guess this is like one of my cable replacement expenses.
Right.
So I think it's like it might have recently gone up. I saw emails about that, but I think I paid like $75 once.
Wow, that's great.
But it's kind of pricey, like $75, and there are open source alternatives.
$150.
Oh, okay, that's actually a lot
Dang.
more. But like I said, it just works. There's probably other ways of doing it, and I like looked online and tried to find a non-paying way of doing it, like every good software engineer person.
Yeah, right.
I don't mean like I tried to steal it, but I just mean like I tried to like look at open source ones, just like native Linux ones. And there were, but they don't really work on Chromecast. They don't really handle like transcoding on the fly. They're picky about, what media you can use, whatever. This one just works, and it works really well for me. And
good.
This gets into one of those, I'm not a lawyer. I can't advise you. You probably shouldn't follow it, but I have a friend who, has kids and wanted to be able to stop having to go pull out like DVDs of cartoons to stick on for them. And it turns out if you kind of record those DVDs on your computer, and if there's a legal way to do that and you did that and you use this to serve them up to your TV, it makes it great because it would make it great because you could then not have to go get the DVDs and stick them in for your children when they wanted something. You could actually just show them the pictures of all the covers and have them choose which one they wanted to watch.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm definitely going to have to try this out. Do they have like a free... Wait, what does the premium get you again?
So I think that's just if you want to, so you can install the server, see that it's correctly picking up your stuff and streaming it over the web interface. And then it's just if you want to Chromecast it, I think is the only thing I use it for.
Oh, I see.
It also offers you the ability to like do remote syncing. So like now that I have the subscription, I can, my phone can upload my pictures to my server as backup, like automatically, and some other features like that.
Gotcha. Cool. That's awesome.
So,
yeah, I'm actually going to install this tonight.
All right. Yeah, well, let me know. Like I've recommended even other ones similar to this on the show, but this is the first one that I've stuck with because it actually seems to work really well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I have a Linux box that's plugged into the TV that's running Ubuntu that I'll definitely install this on.
All right, yeah.
A little bit of a tangent. I installed FreeBSD on a virtual box, like virtual machine, just to see, because it keeps coming up, like this Plex, they have a binary for FreeBSD. And it came up, work and things like that. And so I was like, look, let me just look at this. And because I never quite understood what FreeBSD really was. Mm-hmm. And again, like I played with it for maybe, an hour. So I still don't really know, I think it's like the big difference between it and Linux is the license. So in other words, you can use FreeBSD commercially and it's okay. Like you could even modify the source code and not contribute back, or I don't know. But so there's sort of like political reasons why you'd want to use FreeBSD. But it seems like just not as good as Linux. Like it could be just because I'm used to using Linux. But like, for example, the first thing I did was I tried to, sudo a command so that I didn't have to be root. And sudo like doesn't exist in FreeBSD.
There's some other methodology for doing it, yeah.
Yeah, either that or you have to log in.
So
and,
I used to be into like Linux
root.
distributions and stuff, and I gave up, and now I'm just on Ubuntu.
I'm the same way.
And it's just because there's literally only one reason. It isn't philosophical, political, nothing. It's because when I have a problem and I write in Ubuntu and then my problem, I'm most likely to get my answer than any other distribution.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Like, it sounds horrible, and it's just enough people use it now that like I can typically find an answer to my problem. Yep. I don't have to post my own thing. I don't have to like hack on it for an hour. If there's some like, like you were talking earlier about Open Broadcaster software is going to have a Linux, I know they'll most likely have a Debian or Ubuntu version because it's so popular, and I can just install it and it's almost guaranteed to work.
I remember like when Ubuntu first came out, and like right off the bat, it was just so superior to all the other distributions in terms of its user friendliness. And I remember like immediately saying, like I was using, I think, Gentoo, and Ubuntu came out, and I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I immediately converted. And they just keep getting better and better. And Ubuntu is has a huge like investor. It's actually made in, I think, South Africa, or it's at least a South African investor who owns the Ubuntu company, and so it's just very well funded, and I think that's the reason why it's so polished. But anyways, it's a little digression there.
All right, we're on to funky languages.
Funky languages. So everyone get out your, I don't know, bell bottoms and your, afro wigs and your disco
going back
lights.
to the 70s.
Going back to the 70s. So, so one of them, we'll just kind of go through them and talk about them briefly. So, my favorite is one of my favorites is Whitespace, and as exactly how it sounds. It's all tabs. Oh, first of all, props to whoever suggested this. I don't remember who it is, but somebody wrote in and told us
who you are.
Yeah. So props to you. I'll see if there's a little break I can look you up. But this is a great idea for a show. So Whitespace is all tabs, spaces, and new lines. So literally that is the language. So like one tab means something, two consecutive tabs means something else, so on and so forth. So obviously you'll have to use an editor which can tell you where a tab is versus 4 spaces. So you have to have one that sort of highlights the tabs. But other than that, all of these languages are fully functional. Like you could write anything to them.
They're Turing complete, but they're not necessarily anyone would ever attempt to write actual programs in them. For anything other than fun. Like we don't think these are productive for efficient uses of your time in any way.
Yeah. Like don't bring these up in an interview.
Oh, well, so this Whitespace one, I literally had a conversation today at work where at the job I work at, when we do interviews, we do them on whiteboards or chalkboards, but mostly whiteboards. And I said that I'm going to scare the next interview candidate by saying we're going to do coding in Whitespace on the whiteboard.
You could have sort of like a Fight Club moment. Like at the end of Fight Club, the guy says, he realizes he's. Well,
are you spoiler? Don't spoil.
But that could totally backfire, because you could say we have to write it in Whitespace, and then the person could say,
I've just wrote every program possible.
Or like I already did. There's the perfect answer. It's on the board.
Anyway, that was just a joke, but yes.
Yeah. So Whitespace. One kind of funny thing about it, another funny thing about it is it ignores any real characters, and so languages like Java and C++ ignore Whitespace. So you can actually write a C++ program that has a Whitespace program embedded inside of it, and like if you compiled it with the Whitespace compiler, you'd get one program that worked. And if you compiled it with the C++ compiler, you'd get a different program that also worked, but potentially did something different. They could also do the same. Actually, that would be pretty cool if they have a white space.
It's like both programs do identical things.
Yeah, if they have a C++ to white space transpiler, but one that respected the fact that like there's some spaces that have to be there.
Oh,
you know,
this sounds
like
complicated. Not doing this in Python.
Oh yeah, Python this wouldn't work. But it'd be pretty cool to write a program which took your C++ program and figured out and transpiled it to whitespace and then put the whitespace in the program. But anyways, it's crazy talk.
Okay.
So that's whitespace.
I'll be back with the next one. I don't have very many Arnold Schwarzenegger quotes. But the next one is Arnold C. And most of the keywords and function calls are replaced with Arnold Schwarzenegger movie quotes. I actually don't know where some of these are from. And I probably will not do any more impersonation voices. I need to read Jason's acting book that he recommended.
Yeah, right.
So it's showtime. Talk to the hand with hello world. And you have been terminated. That's not Arnold voices. That was terrible. All right, you want to try, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, so the hello world.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, wait, what's that?
Go ahead. Yeah, do it in the right
accent. The hello world goes, it's showtime. Oh, no. It's like, how does he go? Like, talk to the hand.
Nope.
I work with some guy who's Austrian. He's Austrian, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger? I actually work with a guy who's Austrian, and he does sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is
Do you tell him that? Because I'm sure no one's ever told him that.
I'm sure everyone tells him that. Yeah. And so when the Arnold C program exits, instead of just, exit with parentheses, it goes, you have been terminated.
Yeah, so this one's only awesome if you say all of them in the Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation.
Yeah, that's right. So real quick, the guy who had the idea was Ryan. So props to you, Ryan. He didn't give us a last name or where he's from or anything. But props to you. This is a great idea for a show, Ryan. Thanks.
Okay. So next one is involving more of your senses.
That's
so
right.
Instead of just your eyes, you should also involve your ears and hear the music of your code.
That's right. So the next one is Velato. But
yes.
So the input to the compiler is a MIDI file. So in other words, you play a song on your keyboard, you give that song to the Velato compiler, and out comes a computer program. So it's pretty wild. You could actually hear your source code before you build it.
So this one was actually interesting because when I was reading up about it, it's actually, you need to know some music theory to even understand what it's saying. So for instance, to have an assignment, a variable assignment, then you have to play your second note as a minor third over the first note. You don't need a third note. And then the variable is a single note, then the expression. I don't even know what that means.
I have no idea what you just
An if statement is a third note being the perfect fifth.
Okay.
Do
they have a transpiler? Like, can I take, like some code at work and turn it into Velato and then play it?
I don't know. That would be cool. And then just like listen to what your existing one sounds like.
Yeah. Be like, wow, this is what, this library sounds like.
And it even has allowances. So the command note, which is your root note, and these other intervals are on top of those to, say basically if or whatever, can kind of move around to allow for less repetitive note, like actually make it sound musical.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so this one's interesting. It's just beautiful to look at the program because it just looks like crazy, like that music that I could never play because it's not just one note at a time. And
they really should have a thing in Wikipedia. I mean, not Wikipedia. Wikipedia has this, but they should have a thing on this particular page where you could hear the program.
Yeah.
Wikipedia will pronounce something. Oh, actually, they have it. It's right here.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm going to
play it.
Oops. Hang on. Let me go back.
We're going to get a DMCA takedown.
Here's Hello World. Okay. It actually, there's like 2/3 of it left. But yeah, that's Hello World.
Okay, I heard nothing. I was going to say it sounds a lot like my programs, just empty.
What, you didn't hear anything?
Nope, it's okay though. Well, hopefully we found it, or this will be.
Well, I definitely played it. Hopefully
your audio
the
recording
audience
got
heard
it. All right, cool.
Maybe.
We'll check it later. Don't worry about it.
In the editing, you should just mux it in.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways.
It will have been muxed in.
Yeah.
Ignore this conversation.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? The Wikipedia page has a link to the MP3 if you guys want to listen to it. Cool.
All right.
So the next one is Piet. You want to talk about Piet?
So our previous one was constructing musical programs. This one is using your drawing artiste ability to construct programs. And this is actually, Piet, I believe, is the name of, is it Mondrian? Mondrian Piet is the guy who created those kind of like abstract square paintings where like there's like a red rectangle and a blue rectangle. Maybe I'm completely...
You're right, Piet Mondrian.
Oh, I said it wrong. I think I said Mondrian Piet. Anyways, Piet Mondrian. So if you look at his pictures, there's like a classical, like I didn't know specifically, but I have seen his pictures before, like primary colored squares with like black outlines. Almost look like a stained glass window in some ways. And he's kind of famous for those paintings. And so someone made a programming language which uses that similar style to actually be the program. So it uses the colors and the pixel locations to create what the program is. And of all the pages, this one actually seems like the most filled out with, like, here's the compiler, and here's like the documentation, here's alternative ones, and here's some gallery of, collected ones. So this one seems pretty well put together.
Yeah, I love it. And if you go to the Piet website and you look at the sample programs, they have like Hello World. They have one that prints like Fibonacci numbers. But then they have one that says Towers of Hanoi. This program solves the Towers of Hanoi problem. Don't ask me how it works. I have no idea.
Wait, what?
That's what it says. You have a good funky programming language when nobody knows. Even the person who owns the language website doesn't know how your program works.
Yeah. So again, I have no idea that you could be at all productive in this, especially since like it appears that some of the colors are fairly close, like different shades of red. So if you're colorblind, I think you're just in trouble.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then even if you're just like, there's like different shades of purple represent different things, and maybe if you're like a designer and you're like really into various colors, like this would work, but.
So somebody wrote a Piet transpiler, like a Piet assembler, they're calling it.
Okay.
And so they took a video game, a text adventure game, and compiled it to Piet. And it is, as you would expect, just like a gigantic. So if you're watching the stream, you can actually see what I'm seeing, which is just a gigantic image. And supposedly, if you compiled this image with the Piet compiler, you'd get a text adventure game.
Ooh, fun!
Pretty cool, yeah.
But did you ever use, what was that? Why is the name escaping me now? The one with the little turtles, and you can move the turtles.
Oh yeah, Logo.
Logo, yes. It's kind of like that. Like I feel like these programs should like be animated, like actually do stuff when they run, like produce pictures as the output as well.
Yeah, like if
it seems anticlimactic that you draw this beautiful program of music or whatever, and then the output is like an actual executable that just runs and does normal stuff.
Yeah, totally. There should be like a memory visualizer or something. Cool.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if
you should get on that, Jason. With all your free time.
Yeah, I'll get right on that with all my free time. Yeah. Oh man. Cool.
All right.
Yeah, there's a ton of these funky languages.
Many more.
Yeah, definitely check them out. We covered most of the major ones.
The major ones. I see what you did there. That was a music reference.
Yeah. Oh man. We covered most of them, but there's plenty more, and especially the ones that have the assemblers or transpilers, where you can take your college project and turn it into Valeto or Piet without any work on your part. That would be pretty hilarious to submit that. You know what I mean? It's like
no.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but
No.
like if you could somehow submit a Piet drawing instead of your homework, but then maybe like also submit your homework, then
programming interviews. Cool. Do not do programming interviews in Valedo and like drawing notes on the boards and bass clefs, and no, don't do that.
Yeah, could you imagine if someone said, "Yeah, I only write in Piet, and I'm gonna need a marker of each type of each color."
Oh no. Okay, this is devolving quickly. All right. Well, if we missed your favorite funky language, you can write us and let us know. Maybe we'll have to do funky languages part 2.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Thank you guys for your continued comments of that we're doing good, that you don't like something, that you have questions for us. That's all really good. Recently, I was browsing the tech category of podcasts in iTunes and noticed that of all tech podcasts, so that includes things like Leo Laporte's, like This Week in Tech, some really big major brand podcasts. We were number 74, so that was pretty good. I have no idea what arbitrary rating they're using, but we were number 74, so I was happy to see our little icon in the list with all these other, like, hey, I know what that podcast is, and hey, like, those people are big.
Yeah. So I mean, thanks a lot, guys, for your support. I mean, you're the reason why we get the downloads and the ratings, things like that. So we definitely appreciate it. We're gonna do this Twitch stream for at least a couple more shows. So feel free to jump on. Looks like we're up to like 3 people. So yeah. So
okay, so that's current viewers, but how many like over the course have viewed our stream?
Oh, I haven't been looking. But
I was gonna make fun of us, and then I briefly went to Twitch and noticed the one on their main, like their homepage that they were featuring, was people sitting around a table playing pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm not sure that we're that far off from that. So maybe this isn't such a bad idea. No offense to Dungeons and Dragons or all the wonderful people playing it. I'm sure it was awesome.
I've played pen and paper before. It's been fun. But thanks a lot for your support. It's been awesome. Next time I'll give people more notice, you can jump on and talk to some of the other people who are fans of the show. What else? We hopefully we answered. One other thing is, last episode I talked about rejection sampling. So I briefly talked about this idea of like distributions and sampling easy distributions, to get more difficult distributions. And anyways, so check back on the last episode if you want a recap of that. But somebody was sort of inspired from that and then kind of did some research on Wikipedia and stuff like that and actually implemented rejection sampling. And let me actually put it in the show notes. So check this link out. This guy actually implemented it in IPython Notebook. And so you can actually run it in the browser and see the result and stuff like that. He even has like visualizations.
Talk about viewer feedback.
Stuff. Yeah, it's pretty freaking awesome. So so props to you for doing that. And it actually made me check out IPython Notebook, like give it another look. And actually, I think it's pretty awesome. Definitely a big fan.
So I don't think I said this last time, but I have a little bit of a confession to make. So I think when I was in, what is this, probably like 5th grade, 6th grade science fair, I actually essentially did this for my science fair project.
Oh, really? You made like a notebook kind of thing?
No. So I made a random number generator out of like electrical components that I'd found, like some like in Radio Shack or whatever. And you would push the button and it would give you a random number. And then I collected a whole bunch of random numbers, then like used, I think it was like Mathematica at the time, to like plot them all, with like a quarter quadrant of a circle and like determine how many were in or out of the circle, and basically calculated pi using my random number generator as my science fair project.
Wow, did you win? That sounds like an amazing project.
So, no.
Oh. Yeah, my science fair project was terrible. It actually, you're going to laugh. My science fair project literally was a solar-powered flashlight. Literally. Like, I felt like if you were, like, trying to look into an area, but the flashlight could still have
Wait, I didn't get
power.
so I didn't get it at first. I was like, why are you being so down on yourself? That sounds fine. And then I'm like, oh wait.
Like it only worked for like a minute because like the capacitor was tiny, right? It was terrible.
Oh.
But so Sebastian Rashka, sorry if I butchered your name, but Sebastian's the one who actually wrote this IPython notebook.
Nice.
And it's very cool.
And I wasn't putting it down by saying I
Sebastian.
did that like as a science fair project a long time ago. I was just admitting
No,
to how
I
nerdy I was.
I mean, if I was the judge, you would have won first place.
No, but I think the
it's a pretty
judges didn't
awesome
get
science fair
it. So I think like someone who did like do trees do better with rock music or not won.
Oh yeah.
So
You
like
were like a savant. Like people
No,
just
no,
didn't
it wasn't that at
understand
all. It was just very like it's out there, right? People are like I don't get it. Like
you. Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, it was
Yeah,
more
like,
math than science. I blame myself.
Yeah, you ended up like 2 positions below the rock music, but you did better than the guy who made Facebook for his science fair project. The judges are just that out of touch.
No.
Oh,
no. Okay.
All
right. I think
they
we're
were
gonna
like Y
wrap this up.
Combinator judges.
Okay, wrapping this up. Till next time.
All right. Yeah, we're getting in trouble. So thanks a lot for the support, you guys. The community is awesome. We love the feedback, the emails, the questions. People who take what we say and actually implement it. Totally props to you guys. And yeah, next time we go on Twitch, we'll give you a couple of days or a week notice, so we can get sort of more community. There's some people chatting in there, but yeah, hopefully we'll get more people on there, and you can give us some instantaneous feedback if we mess up or something like that.
All right.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one, guys. See you later.
Yeah.
The intro music is Axo by Binar Pilot. Programming Throwdown is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 2.0 license. You're free to share, copy, distribute, transmit the work, to remix, adapt the work, but you must provide attribution to Patrick and I, and share alike in kind.